Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the final 5K Pioneer Trial here for Nerd Rage Gaming, the championship series. We are getting deep into this tournament here, round number 7. I am your host, Dominic Stryker. That's George DeBoer. Hey, George.
Hello, Dom.
We have an unbelievable match coming up. When they told me who we were going to see playing, I was like, oh, that's cool. Who else are they playing? Oh, that's unbelievable. Just two titans of, if you follow the NRG series here, you are going to know both of the names of both of these players. And both have been seen on coverage so far today as well.
Yeah, so we've got we're gonna have Zoe playing Boros Convoke, and we're gonna have Ryan Hayes again playing Blue Light Control. And this is gonna be a very interesting matchup, depending on who wins the die roll
Oh,
and
absolutely.
what the hands they keep look like. If Zoe's able to get multiple of the Convoke 5-drops early on, I think she stands a really good chance. Ryan has 3 main deck temporary lockdowns in 60 cards, by the way. And so that's going to be
Yes.
something that he's really looking and hoping to draw multiples of early.
Zoe here, starting with that Voldaren Epicure, getting that blood online. And you can imagine in a tournament field like this, both these players doing really well, both seeing play on coverage. I imagine they're aware of what the other player is playing. And Ryan may have been able to make opening hand decisions knowing that this Boros Convoke deck could be looming.
Yeah, but likewise, same for Zoe as well. And so I think both of these players are very good, very astute, and will make as many correct decisions as anybody else in their spot.
Right, Zoe already going for this early game Gleeful Demolition, getting the prerequisite 4 creatures in play with that planes up. My 5-drop signals they're going, right? This is the moment to get a harder to answer threat in play. How many answers does Ryan have to such an early 5-drop?
He's got a lot of soft permission. I think there are some change the equations in the main deck that don't hit the 5-drops, notably, but there's make disappears, and I think that's kind of it.
Right, and we see the big Loxodon come down, easy peasy counter on all of these creatures, but the elephant is told to get lost, but it left 4 power behind.
We're gonna follow up with at least a land, Ryan. Don't start rearranging things like that.
Ryan, I think I see a Hallowed Fountain flipping through. Might be wondering if we're shocking for it.
Whew.
Looks like it tapped in. And sending it back to just Zoe Riederman with 8 power in play, beginning their turn number 3.
That's huge.
And we were talking about how important those temporary lockdowns could be for Ryan. This tap land on turn 3 tells me that it's not here, or at least it's not here yet.
And Zoe's got to start making some calculations. All right, am I playing around Supreme Verdict? Am I playing around
We're putting Jegantha to hand.
temporary lockdown? Yeah, should I continue to develop my board versus play out a 5-drop versus just smack in for 8 a couple times and see how far I can take this?
Zoe doing the plan of, I have this board state. You need to deal with this, and I'll hold back all of these resources. So once you use yours to answer what I have, I'm ready to fire back immediately.
It's just such a tiptoe dance between, if you don't commit enough, Ryan's able to turn the corner with End Step Emperor, Untap Teferi, versus if you overcommit into a Supreme Verdict, you become low on resources, and then the tide turns the other way as well. And I think Zoe's doing a really good job here balancing the tightrope.
And interestingly, looks like we left back the Epicure, got in here with the Goblins, immediately answered by this Wandering Emperor minusing, gaining some life, getting back this big damage from this attack, only taking 2 damage once all is said and done here, but down to 7.
And Zoe looks like she's going to be able to do a little bit of both, a little bit of damage, a little bit of board development, and kind of towing the line here.
We have this Warden of the Inner Sky allowing Zoe to possibly get a use for these map tokens left behind by this Get Lost. We're talking about the upside versus downside of Get Lost and Faithful Absence. This one gave Zoe 2 objects to work with, right? Both of these map tokens that can help them possibly fuel up this Warden.
Yeah, get a little bit of staying power here as well. With the Scries, looking for something maybe a little bit more powerful than 1-drops and 0-drops, maybe another 5-drop, hopefully waiting in the wing.
I don't know if you had this experience, but the first time someone used the Warden ability against me, I had no idea why they were touching their deck, because there's Scry at the end of this powerful, powerful ability. Scry 1's tacked on in there as well. We're using these Explorers, pumping up that Goblin, and sending it back to Ryan. But Ryan with sweepers in their deck, right? We're looking for these lockdowns, verdicts. We even have Farewell, Sunfall. If we can get to 5 mana, we can start cleaning this up.
Yeah, Sunfall would be really,
We
really
have
good.
Farewell in hand.
As it does, yeah, Sunfall leaves a body behind in essence, which can, clean up the current board plus leave back a blocker for later. But Farewell is definitely on the pricey
Yeah,
side.
Farewell is at a minimum a next turn thing, but we need a land drop now and a land drop later. And just an answer to all this pressure, we are only at 7.
Ryan looks like he has the land drops, but he's doing some calculations here of, can I leave behind, or should I leave behind a blocker, or should I just -2 this Emperor straight away? Do I have the ability to survive another turn, depending on which of the game actions that I take?
And it's hard. It looks like Zoe presenting 9 points of damage. So if the Emperor does clean up one of them, we could... Yeah, it looks like we're going to get that powerful Warden out of here. Gain our 2 life. Basically saving as much damage as we possibly can. Not only the Warden stats now and that 2 life, but how big it could be in the future.
Big flash threat here from Zoe with the Resolute Reinforcements. And I think I saw an Eiganjo in Ryan's hand, maybe to stave off some damage, but
It might
this
not
chip
be
damage
enough.
is going to add up. Yeah.
Because Zoe right now with 9 damage incoming, if we answer a 2-power threat, that's exactly 7 coming through. It looks like we'll need 2 answers to all these threats. And Zoe can even use this map token to try to get an extra point somewhere. Fanning through a grip full of cards still for Zoe. Like we said, we took that backseat, just applied pressure, waited back on our cards. We're now applying pressure for the second time and still waiting back on a grip full of cards.
The calculations get so difficult from Zoe's end of thinking, is there another Emperor on the other side? Is there a Shark on the other side? Are there multiple removal spells on the other side? Very often, there's just nothing.
Right. Whenever I play against Blue-White Control, I'm terrified, and they have absolutely nothing.
It's just lands and a 6-drop. So we'll see what direction Zoe wants to take this in.
And if Ryan has to cash in this Eiganjo as the removal spell, that means we do not have that 6 mana for Farewell, even if we do get to that next turn.
No, I think there might be a couple of lands in there. But we'll see. We'll see.
Zoe seems to just be coming in with a couple of threats.
Oh, Ryan's got to be really happy to see this.
We're playing around Settle the Wreckage, right?
Settle the Wreckage. I don't know that that's a common main deck card at this moment in the metagame, but it has cropped up from time to time.
It looks like it's because we're using all that excess for this Knight Captain here to dig through our deck to gain our own value to get more and more cards to keep up with this blue-white deck.
Yeah, this is definitely the 5-drop that Zoe's looking for. Although the first one was really powerful and has been a big contributor to how much damage Ryan's taken, being able to get more threats, more staying power is definitely where Zoe wants to be here, especially as we get into the mid game.
Zoe still has this 2 mana as well, so finding this 1-drop here in this Warden, we can continue to use our mana post combat, set up this 5-drop, get a couple more threats, or hold them, knowing that this blue-white deck has to have these lockdown sweepers of some kind, and maybe hold these as your leftovers for later.
Yeah, and Ryan's got to be really careful. I mean, even if you tap out, even if you do have the Wrath, the Farewell, what have you, Zoe's got some burst damage in the deck. I mean, there's Imodane's Recruiters, which gives haste. There's Heartflame Duelist, which has 3 damage to any target as the adventure side. There's a lot to be thinking about here as Ryan, and he can't be really happy about his spot right now.
Right, and our Knight Captain uses that map token and sees another one on top. So just showing that there is an onslaught of cards that Ryan is going to need to get through here.
And we're scrying 2 with the castle. Couldn't tell what he put on top there.
Now I'm looking through Zoe's deck. I don't believe there's any recourse if we go for one of these big sweepers. The only recourse will be trying to rebuild after the fact.
Yeah.
You can see all of these going away, but Zoe got Ryan down to 4. And there are a lot of ways that we can get some surprise damage in here.
Yeah, and Zoe's been able to get maximum use out of those map tokens, not really getting max value out of this Farewell.
And Zoe, so many cards. It looks a little behind because we have these 4 lands, but we're going to start with this Warden into an Ornithopter. Zoe's ready to dump the contents of this hand out. Thinking as we see we have the 2 permanents plus our 3 mana available. That's what we would need for that Knight-Errant that we drew. But do we want to go even further? And it's a Loxodon as well. Just spread out this power, creating slightly stronger threats. Now, this Ornithopter doesn't start with a power, so we're not quite getting a lot of lethal threats in play, but we're getting closer and closer with each power increase.
Yeah, but with each passing draw, Ryan's also getting closer to digging himself out of this. It doesn't require much for Blue-White Control to turn the corner if there's only 1 or 2 threats being deployed at a time on the other side.
Yeah, that's the terrifying part is we see the temporary lockdown just cleaning up, but the Loxodon gets to stick around.
I think there's a Shark in Ryan's hand that he's maybe hoping to chump block with. But yeah, this is presenting lethal right now from Zoe's end.
And I think we were joking about this last round when our Phoenix player got really close. As we see, Ryan here at 4. Zoe Riederman technically does have forms of Lightning Bolt in their deck. We have some copies of Heartflame Duelist. The adventure there can deal 3 damage upstairs. We might be able to surprise Ryan as we get deeper and deeper in this game.
Yep, and I can't remember. I think Zoe put Jegantha in hand a while ago.
Oh, yeah. It's been waiting there.
There's that 5-drop looming as well.
I see an Epicure that can allow us to sneak in a point of damage.
It was an Eiganjo in hand. All right, and that's just going to cleanly answer that Loxodon.
And Zoe had a Sokenzan in hand, using it as a land here instead of getting these hasty attackers in. Epicure, 1 point of damage. You're down to 3.
Fateful 3 life.
Yeah, and Zoe knows they have these Heart Flames on their deck, and slightly uncommon choice, but one that might be incredibly powerful if we can dig and find it.
Oh, and that's gonna dig. I don't think there was one in that pile.
Right, and I believe because we only convoked 1 creature, we're not even getting that big a hit, having to get these 1-drops here.
Sorry, correct, yes. But we did find 2 1-drops. We didn't whiff at all, and those were some powerful ones. One of them's going to do 1 direct damage, and the other one's a Thraben Inspector.
Maybe the most powerful 1-drop in all of Magic.
It's amazing.
I think draws a card. I don't know if you've seen it.
I mean, we've seen Treasure Cruise, we've seen Thraben Inspector. It's all these powerful cards that Pioneer brings to the table.
As Ryan, our blue-white control player, just ratchets up, getting more and more mana and passing it back, which shows we don't have these big sorcery sweepers, but you're worried about Wandering Emperor earlier, and I'm going to be worried about it every time I'm going to combat.
We're using... I was going to say, we're using the word worry a lot, but I don't see that emotion across Zoe's face at all. She seems really, really in the driver's seat here, very focused and very much ready to win this game.
Right, because Zoe can play this scrappy plan of just trying to get these little points of damage in, because Zoe is still at 20. Not only does Ryan have to face this onslaught, but they have to find a way to fire back eventually too. And Ryan making motion seems we may have something we can do about this lethal combat coming in. Zoe just wants to go to damage, right? Let it through, please, please.
Let's go to the next phase.
Right, but maybe looks like Ryan purposely there moving their 3 mana. Feeling they may have had a shark before. We might need a big blocker here. No creature lands to be seen. That's just a castle. Scrying won't help now.
He's trying to predict what could be on top of the deck and how much mana is he going to need after the fact. Can I afford to
shark for 1
equals 2?
Shark for 1, block, take a single point of damage, go to 2.
There's another Epicure waiting, go to 1.
Oh, and we're going to most likely use this castle with our leftover mana, just try to get something to answer these onslaught. And the Thraben Inspector, draw a card for later if we want it.
Perfect amount of mana left over, yep.
There's a Wandering Emperor on top for Ryan.
That's not going to be enough.
We'd be able to remove the tapped Knight-Errant, gain 2 up to 3, and take exactly 3 on combat. We're going to need something alongside it, and that's game number 1 for Zoe Riederman on this powerful Boros Convoke deck. You said at the beginning it's going to rely on how many of those 5-drops Zoe draws, and Zoe slammed 5-drop after 5-drop, using those to supplement, applying threat, holding a handful of cards. Ryan answered that, applied more threats, kept a handful of cards, and just continued that onslaught over and over and over again.
Yeah, and we see, there's 3 temporary lockdowns here in the main deck. But Ryan wasn't able to find it quite in time there in game 1. He's going to be hoping to draw those a little bit earlier in game 2. Definitely alongside these Regal Caracals, these Chrome Host Sea Sharks, we're going to try to gum up the board a lot more in these post-board games.
Right, yeah. Going through this full sideboard, we got 3 Regal Caracal, 2 of that new Tashana's Tidebinder, 2 Mystical Dispute, 2 Narset's Reversal, the 2 Rest in Peace, the 2 Chromo Seed Sharks, another Farewell, and a Narset. The Regal Caracals feel a lot like a lot of the other sweepers we have, where we're praying to get to 5 mana. But if we can slam these Caracals down, get this army of cats, give everything lifelink, that seems miserable for this Boros Convoke deck.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can cast a lockdown, follow it up really quickly with a Regal Caracal, turn the corner, you're in really good shape. Obviously, a lot more backbreaking if you're a Kahira type blue-white control deck that additionally gives them vigilance and allows them to block on the backswing. But I think even on its own, this Regal Caracal is exactly what Ryan Hayes is looking to draw early on around turn 5 or 6 in this matchup.
Right, and importantly, we said it before about Ryan's version of control right now. We have no Kahira, we have no Yorion. This is just a 60 card, all good cards. Make sure that I can control this game. Let's take a peek at Zoe's deck list as well. And very importantly, take a run through this sideboard. 4 Forge Devil, 3 Wedding Announcement, the 2 Rending Volleys, 2 Red Cap Melee, the Kutzil's Flanker, another new card out of Ixalan, the Jegantha, we saw that come into hand and could have came up in that late game, 1 Redain, God of the Worthy, and another copy of Get Lost. The Wedding Announcement is one of those cards that is here for these matchups that you plan to take a while, right? That has to be a thorn in the control player's side.
Absolutely. That card is incredibly difficult to deal with. It provides so much value. Even by the time you're able to deal with it, the opposing players accumulated so much value, maybe even done a good amount of damage with it, that you're so far behind. Um, Additionally, I think maybe Kutzil's flanker is able to come in just as a flash threat, something that can come in that you can hold up mana for, like Resolute Reinforcements, and clean up after a temporary lockdown or Supreme Verdict, some sort of Wrath. You can do some surprise chip damage with that.
Yeah.
But
Very important on the flanker. It cares about cards that have left play. It doesn't care that where they went or how they went there. So it's not just what died this turn. So if you're using to interact back against a farewell or those temporary lockdowns, it'll still count those cards as having left play. You may have a massive flanker to back up afterwards.
And then just as important as all those cards, Redain, God of the Worthy, a huge backbreaking spell to land, especially on turn 3, in the face of Supreme Verdicts, Wandering Emperors, everything that Ryan might be leaning on to stabilize.
Right. And you always have to understand that one of the most difficult parts about the sideboarding is you don't want to dilute your strategy too much. So this Boros Convoke deck leaning so heavily on these strategies, all these 1-drops, making these extra permanents, using Gleeful Demolition into the 5-drops. That's the straightforward plan. And every time we bring in these sideboard cards, we alter it ever so slightly. So they've got to be important.
Yeah, and these players are off to the races pretty quickly. Land from Ryan, land Inspector from Zoe, and then another land go from Ryan over back to Zoe's turn already.
And if I'm Ryan, I'm feeling a little okay. I have this Castle Ardenvale, so again, if I get to that 5-mana threshold, I can start blocking. But I'm also seeing Regal Caracal if they can get to that point. And instead here we're using this March to answer in response to this Gleeful Demolition.
Big cash in of that spell for Ryan. It can be really difficult to get good use out of that March, that 1-for-1 removal spell when your opponent's making 3 creatures out of a single spell. But being able to nip it in the bud before any of that happens is a really good spot to be in.
Yeah, that March gets to feel almost like a 3-for-1, right? You get to cash in your single March for the 3 creatures they're about to have, and the plan is most likely to use those to Convoke. So using your 1 spell, you're stopping so many of the future parts of that turn and an immediate turn 3 lockdown.
Yeah, and Zoe may have been hoping to land a 5-drop a lot more early on, but Ryan's able to slow that down, and this is exactly what Zoe wants. Being able to find a window to land this Wedding Announcement.
Right. One good 3-drop deserves another. The lockdown took it all away from Zoe, but it's time to rebuild and start creating a new army.
Yep, and it's just going to sit there. Ryan does not have an answer for it. Although he does have a get lost in hand, might be hoping to just save that for a little bit longer.
And Ryan with 4 mana, inching very close to having 5 mana plus that Caracal in hand. That has to be incredibly difficult for Zoe. And this is not how you want to be playing your Imodane's Recruiter.
I mean, isn't it? I mean, you're kind of just deploying one threat at a time, like we were doing in the previous game, and saying, answer this, answer that, one at a time. I'm going to do my damage. You're going to have to keep up with me.
Right, as we see the important part of Get Lost, this card can answer enchantments now too, and using that to remove the wedding announcement from play, replacing it instead with those 2 map tokens.
Yeah, Ryan just waiting to see, I think, what Zoe was going to do there with her turn. Nothing too exciting, and so we did get to cash in that Get Lost there. But
and just
not sure
now
what
I'm
else is
realizing
going on there.
I was just realizing the power of the end step casting Get Lost. Because those map tokens can only use at sorcery speed, your opponent has to let that mana rot and instead wait through their whole turn cycle to when they're back to their own main phase. As a Supreme Verdict cleans up what Zoe had, this was the play patterning from the first game, but Zoe's hand, the leftovers, very important with what's going to be happening. But we know Ryan's leftovers is all those cats.
Yeah, this is different than the first game though, because the first sweeper we cast in the game 1 was a 6 mana farewell, and here we've gotten to cast a lockdown into a verdict, and try to keep everything off the board early on. But Zoe's doing a really good job keeping things populated here.
Yep, and continuing on with this Knight Captain is going to allow them to refill, find those creatures. We convoke 3 of these goblins, allowing us a lot of options, including what I saw and possibly another recruiter floating in these possible options for us.
And Ryan was really, it looks like, hoping to maybe fade one turn where Zoe wasn't able to answer back with some big threats, so that he can untap and slam this Caracal that's waiting in his hand. He's kind of drawn exactly how he would have drawn up his hand to be, but it's just almost seeming like it might not even be enough.
Right, and while Ryan does have the Caracal, we have 3 total cards in hand, so that's our 1 payoff, but there's not going to be a lot left over afterwards. So if Zoe can start piecing together things with this Imodane's Recruiter, or if they can start pumping up that Warden and start getting that thing into the air, we can start creating a lot of problems for Ryan on this seemingly hopeful perfect draw to this blue-eye control deck so far.
Yeah, one of these token decks is a little bit better than the others, I would say. Seeming a little lopsided here.
One of them has lifelink, so they're definitely going to create trouble for the dedicated token deck. Zoe checking on what the buff looks like, how much damage they actually need to try to get through. And just some of these Caracals are going to be good blockers for all these 1-power creatures floating around.
It is notable that the Caracal itself doesn't have lifelink. It gives other cats lifelink. And so once you get the second one down, man, you've got a big impenetrable defense there, but on its own, it's maybe a little bit more fragile than you would hope.
But the cat tokens themselves both enter with lifelink and are given it by the Caracal just in case. So we have these 2/2 lifelinking blockers. And quickly looking to double trade off for this Knight Captain. Typically, I always think about this as you're blocking 4 damage and gaining 4. So it feels like getting 8, right? Just absorbing as much of that damage as you possibly can. And Ryan maintaining an 18-point life total right now. And we look to be using the adventure side of our Imodane's Recruiter to make 2 2/2 Knights with Vigilance.
Oh my god. Huge turn here.
And then very importantly, right now this Recruiter is waiting on an adventure to come down later now that we've amassed this board.
Getting the full value out of all of these cards. So he's really putting on a show here.
And grabbing just 2 more powerful 1-drops. Just having a lot of gas left in the tank if we can just get through this last speed bump of this 3/3 cat. And Zoe most likely can probably ignore it. The lifelink threats are gone, and our power is building and building.
You can just imagine this as just like a shark that got cycled earlier. It's almost like nothing.
There's the lockdown, but remember, we get to keep the Knight Captain, and the Recruiter is on an adventure ready to come down and continue this pressure. And alongside Zoe has 2 1-drops that we drew off that Knight Captain, so we can really have all of it if we want.
Yeah, Zoe, it feels like keeps trading like half a card for a card or a third of a card for a card from Ryan. Just really staying ahead on, it feels like mana and cards and the board and life, kind of on all cylinders firing.
And important to note, Zoe went straight to combat, got in with that damage. This is not the recruiter turn. We are waiting, we are setting up, and we will know when the time is right. Another Warden. We have this Voldaren Epicure. We know there's also a Thraben Inspector in hand if we want it. The leftovers in hand, Epicure and Thraben Inspector. Ryan
like
cashing in this changed the equation.
Does not feel good.
The Warden is very powerful, but there's so many things happening, and you don't get the biggest like trade up on your mana, right? It's just your 2 mana for their 1-drop,
Yeah.
and they can still use their excess 3 and pick up this Jegantha. Ryan, very few cards. Using that change the equation, put them down to 1 plus our draw step here. Just these 2 cards to work with.
I think Ryan's 2 cards are Emperor and March, and he can only cast 1 this turn because of his mana.
Yeah, these pathways, these blue-white ones, both on the blue side. With this castle and this Eiganjo, only 2 white. The Emperor needing both of them. Having to choose is detrimental.
And we also cannot activate our Castle Ardenvale because of the same reason.
Right, because we don't have the second source needed for the activation cost.
This is unfortunate.
Part of the woes of the Pioneer mana base is it slowly gets better and better. But Pathways only being able to use on one side. That blue was important early. And now Zoe's looks to probably be fully deploying the contents of this hand. Possibly smelling blood in the water, and this may be the moment to go for it. Big recruiter giving +1 and haste this whole team and getting in there. Your 3/3 can only do so much. It is important that they're going to be able to use this Wandering Emperor here. Trade off a couple, maybe the exile, the gaining of the 2 life. But Zoe's pressure is not going to stop. You can even see a Shefet Dunes hiding in their mana base. If we get through this turn to next turn, we have another Anthem effect to pump all this team up and continue applying this pressure. Ryan. What are we thinking? The onslaught from Zoe. And it looks like that decision to play out that Wandering Emperor. You could use it to make a 2/2 and just get our block on. It feels like the gaining of 2 life might be important here.
Yeah, get rid of the 5-drop, gain some life, which will offset a couple of these attacks.
And getting rid of the 5-drop makes future lockdowns better, correct?
Yeah.
So our outs, they're trying to draw a way to sweep all this up.
There's only 1 lockdown left. But yeah, future lockdowns might get better here. And we're going to keep our Caracal around, so we don't really want to trade with the recruiter at the moment.
Important, right? I saw us choosing which of these 1-drops to trade off with. Importantly, choosing to trade off with the Thraben Inspector, being a white creature for our 2 white-based Convoke spells. Just an ever so important part of trading off here, making sure to get that white creature out of play. We know Ryan with that leftover March and just our draw for turn. Going up with the Wandering Emperor, making this 4/4 blocker now. And flipping through.
Was that a Siege Shark for a draw for turn?
It was, in fact, a Chrome Host Siege Shark.
Ooh. This could maybe help him stabilize. With the last card in his hand being an instant speed spell, it will be able to remove one of these creatures and create a body for a blocker for next turn. If Ryan's able to chain off a couple of spells in a row, this could really help him stabilize.
Right. Important to note, though, it makes these incubation tokens, and you need the 2 mana to flip them over into that creature. And Ryan just working with very low resources this whole game. We see Zoe. Importantly, it looks like tapping that Shefet Dunes now is not the time. Cracking that clue, getting our extra cards thanks to Thraben Inspector. Using our Blood just choosing to discard this Sacred Foundry, drawing up, just using all the tokens left behind by these 1-drops to continue to filter through their hand.
And with all the game actions that Zoe's taken so far, this game, Ryan's still at 7. I mean, this 4/4 and this 2/4 blocker are pretty big. They really hold the fort down a lot better than Zoe was hoping she would see on the opposite end of the battlefield.
Right, I got a quick. Looks like Zoe has this Ornithopter, has a Resolute Reinforcement, and the Jegantha they picked up. So we're going to just toss out this O2. And it looks like we might have been brick-walled by this 4/4.
I think we're passing, and Ryan's got to be breathing a sigh of relief here. I think it's the first turn in a long time where Zoe just has not attacked.
Right, that might be the first sigh of relief since last round.
Honestly. And now we get to trigger our shark. We get to untap, make another body with this Emperor. We have another blocker.
Right, we're going to make this 2/2 incubate, which may, lock up 2 of our mana if we want to turn this into a 2/2 blocker. Looks like we may have drawn a Hall of the Storm Giants off the top there. Quickly into play.
Not great, not terrible. Actually, more on the terrible side.
It at least shores up our mana to know that we're going to flip this incubate token.
Yeah, but it's not a white producing mana either. So again, this Ardenvale still offline.
Or we may even be in a scenario where we might be using this Castle Vantress, just trying to find the spells of relevance. And continue to go up with this Wandering Emperor, just making as big a blocker as we possibly can. And allowing us to, if need be, have the minus available and still keep this Emperor in the future. But the Resolute Reinforcement, being a threat, bringing a threat, using Jegantha to discard to a blood, just trying to find as much as we possibly can.
Feels like Zoe's looking for another recruiter to kind of just OTK Ryan here, seeing the big bodies amass on the other side. 7 life is not very much, and it can all come crumbling down here. And Zoe's draw for turn was an Eiganjo.
I was looking at it, can take care of the blocking out of this Regal Caracol if we wanted to.
But not the shark, because Ryan upticked on it with the Emperor. That's huge.
Incredible. Just the choice of splitting this damage around off the Wandering Emperor, pumping up both of our creatures, make them as good of a blocker as we possibly can, may just save us from this Eiganjo. Zoe's lining them up. It doesn't feel like it's time. There's no way to pump these. The Ornithopter is not coming in for damage. A lot of 1-power creatures still.
There was a Shefet Dunes, again, like you pointed out earlier, but I don't think this damage is adding up the way Zoe would like it to.
And don't forget, in that bottom right corner, we have that incubate 4/2, that egg just waiting to pop into another 2/2 creature. You can see Zoe, right? We can feel it too, that the game might just be slipping away with all these aggressive creatures, but these are just brick walls right now.
Even as it stands, like if Ryan does not draw spells for the shark, his army's still getting bigger and bigger every turn because of this Emperor. He's going to be able to start Castle Ardenvaling. I mean, I don't even know what Zoe could hope that Ryan bricks on, because the current board itself is really gummy.
We have this attack with just this recruiter. Might be trying to create a scenario where we can use this Eiganjo effectively. And it may just pay off here. There you go. Yep, make sure we're still in combat. We're still considered a blocking creature. Use this moment to get the 4 damage out of our Eiganjo. Alongside that of the Imodane recruiter, allowing to trade off these 2 cards with this powerful Seed Shark.
And I think Ryan's okay with this. Although, would have loved to keep that shark around. Kind of a 2-for-1. Finally, things may be going his way here, he thinks.
And it was interesting, right? Attacking with the recruiter is most likely our threat that could apply the most pressure if need be. And kind of making Ryan feel like this is a good time to try and block, allowing us to unlock that Eiganjo.
And Ryan finds a Sunfall on top with the Scribe. Being able to not have to crack that incubate token and be able to use all his mana last turn on the Scry 2 was huge.
And when the control player attacks, you know that something's coming.
You know. You just know.
Because you have to take the damage. You don't want to trade off. That gives them kind of a free wrath. And now all these creatures cleaned up by this Sunfall.
And another incubate token going to be made here from Ryan. So now a 5/5 and a 2/2 waiting. These are going to maybe end the game really quickly in a couple of turns.
Here's the creature out of the sideboard.
Oh my god.
The one of Kutzil's flanker tracking every card that left play this turn. Put a 1/1 counter on it for each creature that left the battlefield this turn.
8 power? Right? That's going to get 5 1/1 counters?
Right, because it's not even tracking only your creatures. Ryan lost their Caracal as well. We know 5 creatures went away because of the tracking on this Sunfall. This is going to be an 8 power creature, and the only thing that could possibly stop it is this lone 2/2 Samurai.
That is lethal power. The Samurai can block it as it stands. Things are looking really fragile from both sides here.
Yeah, we are
really,
looking for
really
something.
tense.
Because we know that there may still even be those duelists in Zoe's deck that may be able to let you answer the Samurai and get through for that damage. We are going to try. We may have brought in this copy of Get Lost, something to try to answer this 2/2.
Okay, it is a 4/4 because it does say under your control. Still lethal, though. Still 7 power.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. Absolutely. And seeing the card drawn and immediately into the tank.
That was so good and yet so bad for Zoe because this Wandering Emperor, this onboard removal spell, there's just nothing she could do about it.
Oh, a Giant Killer a turn later. We could have used that as a tapper, but we have it here now. And this Giant Killer can be an answer to the large 5/5 out of Ryan. But we're using this minus on this Emperor, gaining some life, getting that massive threat out of here. And Zoe untapping with a Giant Killer.
And no cards in hand for either player now, but Ryan's got 2 creatures ready to block on the field, 2 castles ready to go, a Hall of Storm Giants ready to deploy, and Zoe now with this maybe a little bit too late Redain.
I mean, an important aspect of this Redain, though, it does fly. So this may be our only way to get over this army that Ryan has from these 2 Incubate tokens. Our opponent is at 9. It's a 2 power flyer. We can try. We can get there. Ryan resolving those scribes from that castle. Both players top decking, but that looks to be a quick study. The instant speed draw, too.
I couldn't tell if that was one that he bottomed or one that was part of the pile. I did see one in the pile.
Just get even deeper, right? Find those relevant spells. And even so, you're leaving up 4 mana. Those can be your 2 incubates.
Ooh, I think you want to fire that off right now on that Shefet Dunes.
Right, a difficult decision. It matters a little, but so does also activating your big incubate creatures.
You'd still be able to make that 5/5, but yeah.
And we see that Flying Vigilant Redain getting in there for those 2 points of damage. Time for that.
Ryan's happy about that. I think he's smirking. I think that was a farewell that's left.
You are correct. And even with this Redain, they have the ability to pay the 2 extra exactly in their current mana base of 8 lands. So this recruiter can float over there in the adventure zone, but we're going to be able to answer a lot of what's currently in play now. We got our 2 2/2s. And we are, in fact, answering the Shefet Dunes. If we had played the recruiter, we would have just been blocked by the big giant incubates. Zoe's just trying to dance around all these little after effects, right? The leftovers from the Seed Shark, the leftover from the Sunfall, but they're going to be huge and they will be on blocking duty.
For a couple of turns there, to Zoe's benefit, a lot of Ryan's game actions were face up on the table, right, with 0 cards in hand. But I think with this quick study and starting to pull ahead, Zoe's now having to play around unknown cards, and a Wandering Emperor was the draw for Ryan. That's going to be a great follow-up to this farewell.
But we have that did tap us out. We have this looming recruiter. Can we assemble some amount of damage with this coming off that adventure?
1, 2, 3.
Quick recruiter.
Just the recruiter on its own.
Trigger, rumble.
I think that means
Ryan at
that
lightning
Zoe's
bolt range.
draw must have been a land.
The 3
Any
damage
other
there
creature,
from the recruiter.
yeah, any other creature would have been played by Zoe pre-combat.
Oh, it's an Ornithopter as the leftovers there.
It looks like just drew an Ornithopter for turn. 2 very unfortunate back-to-back draws there.
And Ryan now able to use this Memory Delusion hand. Both of the castles, these incubate, the choices are all theirs.
I think this game is now slipping away from Zoe.
And it won't even take that long, right? Some of the hard parts is when you're playing these blue-white control decks and you get the game finally under control, is putting that game away. But between this 5-5 and our haul, this may not take too long. Putting 7 points of power into play with just the leftovers from spells long ago. Looks like we even drew an Odawara, so if something happens here that's a little difficult to deal with, we could bounce it if we need to. Lining up our mana, is this a haul turn as well?
No, I don't believe so. It looks like we're maybe tapping for another draw spell. Shark.
Or another Seed Shark.
Big, big shark.
And back to Zoe.
And no attacks from Ryan, playing it safe. I'm just saying, hey, I'm going to just try to block with as many things as I can. I'm going to amass an army wide enough to possibly he's going to be looking to one-turn kill Zoe.
Zoe playing out this Ornithopter and this Warden. Suddenly, the attacking deck may be put on the defensive. Wandering Emperor coming in here, triggering the Seed Shark, and Zoe has seen enough. Very importantly, though, going to a game number 3, Zoe will be on the play with this ever-powerful Boros Convoke deck, just looking to get the game over quick.
By a thread, Ryan was really, really stuck it out there. Zoe put pressure and was asking questions every single turn, and Ryan was able to find the answers up until the end there, and it's gonna take it to a game 3.
Yeah, the onus will be on Zoe, as you said when we began, on the hunt, on the look for those big 5 drops, right? The cards that may be able to play well into the temporary lockdown, as that is the early interaction that we'll see out of our opponent before getting to the verdict at 4, the Sunfall at 5, the farewell at 6. But the early onslaught, the early game, that is where Convoke is the most powerful. So if we can find those big 5 drops and survive through that lockdown, could be very helpful.
Yeah, Ryan was able to disrupt almost at every step of the early game there, and I think that's what kept him in as long as he was in the game. Because Zoe's start, if she had been on the play, for example, looks very, very different. Starting with the march for the Gleeful Demolition that Ryan had, and then following it up with a temporary lockdown, following that up with a Supreme Verdict, a Regal Caracal, a Wandering Emperor, almost exactly all the cards that he would have wanted, he was able to draw. And so even so barely survived.
Right. Barely is a great way to put it, right? I was just thinking, it's like there was even a spot during that game where I was saying, it's like, it seems like Ryan is drawing it up perfect, and Zoe is still very, very close in this game.
Yep. Yeah, that kind of escaped by the skin of his teeth there. And Zoe being on the play now, if she's able to keep a good aggressive hand, maybe with a little bit of staying power, one Knight-Errant of Eos, kind of just to refill there, can probably steal this pretty quickly.
Right, as we see these players drawing up their opening hands, I see Ryan quick with a temporary lockdown in hand. This may be some 2 snap 7s for these players.
I think I also saw a March and a couple of 2-mana interactive spells. So he's probably going to shock in this Hallowed Fountain and hold up for this Gleeful Demolition, I believe.
Right, just allowing just these couple of pieces like 1 and 2 mana interaction allow Ryan to stem the bleeding before you get to those big sweeping effects.
And if you're Zoe, you have to wonder, is this a bluff? Does he actually have it? Should I go for it? I don't even know if Zoe has the Gleeful Demolition. But hey, 2 damage is 2 damage.
Right, and with Zoe here attacking with the Thraben Inspector, that sends signals loud and clear to you, the opponent, that it is not a Convoke turn, and it looks to be this Twin Heart Duelist. I'm sorry, Heartflame Duelist. The instants and sorcerers have lifelink, but just playing it out as this 3-1.
Yep, 3 power. Now we've got 4 total on the board. You've shocked yourself for 2 damage, Ryan. I mean, not the quickest start, but still very powerful.
And we see pitching a Wandering Emperor here so that we can get that extra buff on the March for Otherworldly Light to remove the Duelist from play, showing an importance on that larger powered creature.
I like that very much, and I like specifically because you're using your mana. Just passing there and untapping as Ryan, it's kind of a huge waste, but being able to hold up 2 mana for an interactive spell, yes.
Answering the turn 3 recruiter.
Exactly where you want to be. Zoe really wanted to get in with that damage.
Zoe left with this treasure and this inspector. Shocking for this on turn 4. Convoking for a single creature on this Knight-Errant. Looking for 1-drops.
No make disappear from Ryan's end, and it looks like a whiff from Zoe.
I was seeing Redain, Wedding Announcements, Gleeful Demolitions, all the cards that could be great here, but just not 1-drops and not findable with this Knight-Errant.
Looks like Ryan's grip is full of white cards, and that signifies removal spells here at the fateful 4-mana juncture.
And we have our mana much cleaner this game. Blue-white land, blue-white land, blue-white land, and that castle. Going to have access to a lot of these tricks and not have to worry about our mana and casting our spells.
I think I spotted another March in hand for Ryan. And I think a temporary lockdown.
And we have Zoe with another of these Knight-Errants. As you're saying, if there are possibly a lockdown on the other side, these do not get swept up by it, but they're just slowly picking up these 1-drops. But a whiff last time, and instead, it looks like we have options here for this one.
Ryan might have nothing to do with his mana this turn.
As Zoe picks up a Thraben Inspector and a Warden.
Those are 2 very powerful pickups there.
And it will be interesting to see if Ryan does anything with this 4 mana being left on the table.
Because this March doesn't hit any of these creatures unless he wants to exile a spell. You don't want to exile the Caracal because that's your staying power. And if you exile the temporary lockdown, knowing that there's 2 1-drops waiting for you, that doesn't feel great either.
Yeah, a lot of tough situations is Zoe putting Ryan in here. As we play out the Warden and immediately activate it with our 3 available resources. You look to be correct. No mana used there by Ryan and untapping for their turn number 5. Do they have land number 5? They do, and slam the cat.
It's going to buy some time, but Zoe's side of the field is getting more and more powerful.
Right, we just have 2 4/4s, let alone a lot of the Convoke synergies and playing out this Warden and getting here with this Thraben Inspector. 4/4s are no joke on this board right now. Zoe able to use all these excess resources, this Inspector, these clues, to beef up this Warden, scry again, get a little more power. We're very close to putting that thing in the sky.
Yeah, we kept a card on top with the scry.
Remember, if this thing has 3 counters on it, it'll gain flying and vigilance. So we were inching very close to that mode. Cracking a clue, digging even deeper. Trying to track what's in there, just can't quite see. Looks like we did bring in that copy of Get Lost. We have the 2 mana available if now is the time to use it. We'll answer the Caracal proper. Remember, the tokens naturally come in with lifelink. So even though the Caracal leaves, we do still have these 2 lifelinking blockers, but they are no longer 2/2s. These are just 1/1s. Most likely just going to try to get in the way. And this round looks like we just got notification, only 2 minutes remaining. We need to get this game over with and quickly.
Yeah, those 1/1s blocked for a turn, but they're really small. They didn't get a chance to trade with anything. All the 4/4s are still here. There's a 3/4. There's a Thraben Inspector. It's not looking too great. There might only be a few minutes left in round, but that might be all Zoe needs.
And we have this temporary lockdown, but as we said this whole time, these 2 5-drop, these 4/4s surviving the lockdown and continuing to apply pressure here to Ryan. Zoe is prepared to untap. Ryan plays their land, sends it back. Zoe,
Ooh,
very
Odawara.
powerful board.
Yeah, we're gonna smack in for 8 here. We know Ryan can't do anything about it. He was thinking about holding that Odawara for a potential, time walk effect, but these are not necessarily creatures you want to bounce anyway.
Right, Zoe playing this Epicure, she's getting in 1 extra point just every little bit, ticking away from Ryan's life pool. Discarding to that blood, get this Vantage out of here. We want all relevance. I think I see another Ornithopter floating in Zoe's hand. This thing loves to come in these important moments. What do we do with our 4/4s? Combat, Rumble, both of them. No blocks, down to 6 for Ryan Hayes. The pressure is fully on. The race is on. Both players are dialed in. These Knight-Errants are huge. Playing our land. 5. Another of
It was
these
not an
Knight-Errants.
Ornithopter. Oh my god.
Yeah, never mind me. Instead, it's far better. Finding us another Warden and another Epicure. Woo-wee.
All right, super lethal on board here, Ryan. What do you got?
Ryan, top of the deck. Reveal. I think we have a March
Land.
game.
GG.
Zoe Riederman applying the pressure with this Boros Convoke deck, doing it exactly in the way that you said when this round began, George, that the best way to take down this blue-eye control deck is put the giant 5/5s, the 5-drops, the 4/4s, gain all that power, gain all that advantage. It allowed, you saw lockdown came down, took a bunch of the little creatures, but left the big ones behind. Those got to draw Zoe more cards, and she was able to take it down 2-1.
Yeah, the problem with blue eye control is you're just not able to use your mana for interaction and also for development of your own mana and your cards in hand at the same time. And if your opponent's asking you questions every single turn and you're on the back foot every single turn, you can draw all the removal spells you want, but at a certain point, you're going to run out of steam. And that's exactly what we saw there. And I want to applaud Zoe as well. I think I caught a glimpse of her looking at the round timer towards the end of that game, too, kind of thinking to herself, look, I'm not dead yet, but I'm going to concede here because I'm going to have to win game 3. That was a very, very smart, very well seasoned tournament player thing to do. And it paid off for her.
Right. Yeah. You know that tournament grinder feeling where you're like, okay, I'm in this game. I might have a 5%, 1% out. Look at the clock, look at your opponent, realize that you don't have that kind of time. Scoop it up, knowing that you need a whole game and you can be advantaged in that game. You're the aggro deck on the play. You kept your full 7. Like that sort of understanding allowed Zoe to push through in exactly those last few moments, those last few minutes left of that game. And a part that I wanted to point out is, big props to Zoe for winning that game, but Ryan Hayes floating in 10th place on our leaderboard, really needing those points from this weekend to qualify for champs. And this might be a small hiccup on that journey. Folks, we are rearing up into our final round of this 5K Pioneer trial. This is round 7. We're done. We're going to see you all for round 8 very soon. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
See you in a bit.